Hi everybody, my name is Nick Justitian. I teach virtual production at Drexel University, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at this Black Magic Design Hyperdeck and how we can control it through Unreal Engine. So let's take a quick look at my project setup. This is just the standard MetaHuman sample. What I've done is added a media capture just so that I can send video out of my SDI into the Hyperdeck so you can see what's going in there and that we have something to record. This isn't really necessary at all for the ability to control the Hyperdeck. It's just so that for the purposes of this tutorial we have something to see. So I'm going to switch over to my details panel here. And then the other thing is that I do have Take Recorder set up so that when we're communicating with the Hyperdeck, we can actually name files based on what the Take Recorder wants to name the slate and take. All right, so let's stop our playback and rewind. And so this is the sequence. And as you can see on the Hyperdeck, as I scrub through, this is the output. That's all wonderful. What we want to be able to do is operate that Hyperdeck. So let's take a look at how that's even possible. On the back of the Hyperdeck is a Ethernet jack, and that is available to connect Ethernet, and you can have that on the same network as your Unreal Engine computer, and then they can communicate. This is going to be through an IP address and port. So if we go to the Hyperdeck documentation, there's a section called Developer Information, and there it notes that the port that we need to communicate over is 9993. So the address, the IP address, is configurable. So let's take a look here at our Hyperdeck, and if I click on our menu button here, I can move over into the settings, and you can see that one setting that's super important is that the remote setting is on, and then of course we want to make sure that we have the IP address defined. In this particular unit, it's 10.30.1.130. So we'll be communicating to that address, and just to make sure that the computer is connected, I'm just going to go to well, actually not Unreal Engine. Let's just hit Windows and type in CMD to open up my command prompt, and just to see if the computer is indeed on the same network and communicating, we'll start with a ping command and enter in the IP address 10.30.1.130, and we should get responses back. So here we are, we're seeing replies come back. So the computer is indeed connected to the Hyperdeck. So I'll just hit menu to get out of this menu system. Now if we go back to our developer information, we'll see that there's a variety of protocol commands. So these are basically text commands that can be sent over TCP to the Hyperdeck at the address and port that it's using, so that it will respond to these when it's in remote mode, which we've already verified that that's the case. So we can again test this with the command prompt first, and so there is a command for device info and quit and ping, etc. So let's go back to our command prompt, and we're going to use a command called telnet, so T-E-L-N-E-T. And then telnet needs two parameters, the IP address and the port. So I'll space 10.30.1.130 and then space 9993 for the port. And then enter, and sure enough, we get a response back from our Hyperdeck. And I can use one of these commands like play, and we'll see if our Hyperdeck plays. And look at that, it's playing a clip. And then I can hit in stop, S-T-O-P, and hit enter. All right, and it stopped. So now I know for sure that the computer is connected and the Hyperdeck is responding to commands. So I can start to work towards doing that from Unreal Engine. So let's switch over to Unreal, and we're going to take advantage of a plugin called the TCP Socket Plugin. It is completely free. So if we go into Launcher, under Marketplace, and search for TCP and hit enter, we should find, yes, TCP Socket Plugin. Of course, I've owned it. Free. Okay, so you can get this, click and install to your engine. It's compatible with versions 4.2.2 all the way up to version 5.0, and so this plugin should be working for all of those versions. follow the normal instructions for installing to your engine. And then in Unreal Engine, you'll just want to go to your Edit and your Plugins window and look for that TCP socket. So TCP, and here's the TCP Socket Plugin. And so that needs to be activated. And of course, you'll probably have to do a restart if it wasn't active already. So now that that plugin is working, what that does is allows us to create a special kind of blueprint actor that can communicate through those TCP sockets. So let's go to our content browser. I've created a folder for BMD.io for input output. I've got my media output set up here, and that's what's feeding video to the Hyperdeck. Again, not necessary at all in terms of controlling the Hyperdeck, but it's just there so that we have some example content. I want to create a blueprint actor now that is based on that TCP class. So I'll right click and choose a blueprint class. And I don't want to just select actor. Instead, I'm going to go here to all classes. If you have nothing down here, you'll just want to spin open the all classes and type in TCP. And if the plugin is working great, you should have TCP socket connection. So we'll select that, drop that in, and we'll call this Hyperdeck and TCP. There we go. All right, so now that actor class exists, and I can go ahead and start making some definitions. So I'll double click to open that. It opened on my other computer screen, so let me just bring it over here. And so we'll start to create some events that we can work with. The first thing we want to do is be able to connect to that TCP address and port. So let's go to our event graph. And we're not going to need any of these default events, so I can just select them and delete them. And we'll need a variable to store the IP address that we're going to be talking to. So down here in variables, I'll add and call this Hyperdeck address, and that'll be the variable's name. And I'll click on Boolean, change that to a string, and I want to make this public. So I'm going to take this closed eye and click it to be an open eye. So now, just to show you what happens, is that this will become something that the user can edit in the editor, and we can also access it through other blueprints if we need to. So we compile that, and we're all set. We'll go ahead and create an event that puts this to use. So right click and custom event, and this will give us a command that can be run and executed on demand. In this case, I want to do connect Hyperdeck. Here we are. So that's a really long name. Let me make it a little bit smaller, because whatever name I put in here is the name that's going to be showing up in a button in the editor. So let me just call this Connect TCP. There we go. So because this is a socket actor, I can use socket functions that are added because of the plugin. So I can right click and type in the word socket, and we should, yep, here we go. We have a whole section of new functions that are available because of that plugin. And what we want to do is connect. So there we are, connect right here. And we'll connect our execution pin, and we'll get our IP address variable. We'll get that and connect that to IP address. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not going to make this set of functionality particularly rugged. You could certainly put in a branch to double check that this is a valid IP address before connecting. For the purposes of streamlining this tutorial, I'm just going to make everything direct execution and hope that I type in everything correctly, rather than have error catching within the blueprint. So feel free to insert your own error catching as you like. All right, so we're going to have a variable that has the IP address, the port that's going to be based on that document, which was 9993. And finally, we're going to need some delegated events to respond to, otherwise this won't compile. So for example, if I compile right now, we get an error because these weren't defined. So we're just going to go ahead and define them by dragging off of this and releasing and typing in custom. We'll add a custom event and we'll call this disconnected, and we'll just repeat that for each one of these. Now, as I'm doing this custom event, I'm just going to note that these tend not to run in editor. They do run in simulate mode or play in editor, but I'm not actually going to use these functions. I'm just going to create the events, so connected in this case. I'm just creating the events so that we can compile. And finally, this one is another custom event. And this is on message received, so MSG received. Okay, so now these exist. Again, you can certainly look at the documentation for the plugin, and there's certainly things you can do here. During simulate or play in editor, you can actually get the feedback from the Hyperdeck and display that or act on that. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just showing how we're able to send commands to the Hyperdeck itself, and so I'm not going to populate these. The one thing I do want to do is store this connection ID so that when I send commands later on, I am sending them to the correct connection ID. So let's create another variable down here, and we'll call this connection ID. And we will call this an integer because that's what we have here, connection ID integer. So this will be an integer. We don't need to share this with anybody else, so we'll keep that public closed. And finally, we're just going to take connection ID and set connection ID. And connect our execution pin, connect our data pin, and that should be all we need to compile. Great. No errors. One final thing is I'm just going to go here and connection ID, put in a -1 just for the sake of having a default value that is not valid. 0 is actually a valid value for this. Compile once again. Okay, so this will set up our connection ID. Only thing is I want to be able to call this from the editor. So for this to work, we're going to drag and drop this into our level. And now there is an actor for this blueprint, but we're not seeing any of the commands, this particularly connect TCP command showing up. So I'm going to click on my custom event and activate this call in editor checkbox. Now when I compile, we've got this new section here, and there's our Hyperdeck address field and connect TCP. So I can do 10.30.1.130. There's our address. Again, I went ahead and hard-coded, just typed right in, this is the port number 9993. That's always going to be the same. So let's add a couple more custom events so that we can test that we're able to control the Hyperdeck we want. Let's just start with simple commands like play and stop. So I'll right-click, custom event, add custom event. We'll call this one play, and right-click and create another custom event, and stop. Okay, now I could set up everything that is needed to send this command here in our event graph, but we're going to be using this idea of sending a command over and over. So it's really a good idea to just create a function that'll handle some of this overhead for us all in a single function. So I'm just, in this case, going to create a function. So down over here under my blueprint, functions, add a function, and we're going to call this send CMD for send command. Now send command is going to need, well, a command string. So I'm going to have an input here and add an input, and we'll call that CMD string, and that'll be whatever command we actually want to send. It needs to be a string. It needs to be a string. There we go. That works. And we can do a compile. All right, so far no errors. Wonderful. So what are we going to do when we get the string? We want to send it to the socket that we opened up. So let's right click and type in socket. Oops, I spelled that. There we are. And scroll up. Here's our socket section, and somewhere here we have send data. So we're going to be sending the command to the Hyperdeck. All right, so we're going to execute that whenever this happens, and we just need a connection ID from our variable. So we'll pull our connection ID variable, get that ID, and that was populated by our connect TCP. And then the data to send, and you can see this is not a string, it's an array of bytes. So let's we could connect this command string directly and have that converted. However, there is one last little wrinkle. Remember when we used the command prompt here, we would type the command and hit enter to send it. As we typed each key, they were actually being transmitted to the Hyperdeck. And so hitting the enter key actually sent a carriage return, a return character to the Hyperdeck in order for it to execute. And we're going to need to do the same thing when we're sending our commands to the Hyperdeck from Unreal. So what I'm going to do is pull off a command string, and I need to append a carriage return. So type in append, and here's string append. And so this will be our command string coming in, and then after that what I'm appending is the enter key. And to do that, I'm just holding the shift key first on the keyboard and then hitting enter. And that adds a carriage return into our string here, and that'll get appended to whatever command we want to send. And then finally I need to convert this string to bytes, and thankfully the Socket plugin gives us a conversion utility. So I'll pull off of the string pin and type in socket, and there it is, string to bytes. And so now this function converts our string to bytes we can send to the Hyperdeck, and there's our function. So we'll send to that connection ID whatever command comes in with a carriage return, and that should execute it. So we compile that. All right, all is good. We won't need this function graph anymore. And so now we can put that function to use here. So we're just going to use the play command, and we'll do send command cmd. There it is. There's our function. And all we need is our command string. In this case, it is play. And let's make sure we can also stop it. So again, send cmd. And this time it is stop. And of course, stop. I'm just typing in these commands from memory, but they're all in the documentation for the Hyperdeck. And finally, we just want to make sure that play is call in editor and stop is call in editor. So let's reduce this. We've got our actor in the level selected. Only connect TCP exists. Compile. Now we've got two more buttons. So let's bring up our Hyperdeck and hit play. Oh, of course. So when we compile, we basically reinitialize all of our connections. So there's no connection after compile. So we need to connect to our TCP, and now hit play. And there we go. All right, it's working. In theory, I hit stop, and it stops. Great. So we could add a couple other little commands here. Let's add a previous clip and a next clip. So we'll go into our graph editor, right click, and type in custom. We'll make a custom event and call this previous clip. And one more, right click, custom, add custom event, and call that next clip. And let's just go take a look at our documentation. And if we scroll down, what I'm looking for is go to : clip ID : then we can use +1 and -1 to advance or reverse. So I'm just going to select all of this string here, Control C. Yeah, I got the squiggly, but we'll take care of that when we paste it in. So previous clip, send command, and we will paste in that command from the manual, and that's previous, that's a minus, and instead of squiggly we just do -1. And let's just copy this whole command and Control V paste. And so for next clip, all we need to do is change that minus to a plus. Okay, so now we reduce this, we take a look down here. When we compile, we didn't actually make our new events call in editor. So let's go ahead, call in editor, and next clip, call in editor. Sorry about that. Nothing here, nothing up my sleeve, compile, and there we go. So now, again, we just compiled, so let's connect, and we can hit play. Play is working, stop is working. Let's go to the previous clip. All right, we jumped, play, stop, next clip. So all of that's working great. So we've got basic operation of this working. So now let's set ourselves up so we can record. And even more than that, we want to record with a specific file name. So just as a quick look here back at our documentation, if I scroll up here, there is a clips get command, and that lists all the clips that are in the Hyperdeck. So if I go back to my telnet command prompt, I can type in clips get and hit enter, and you can see by default the Hyperdeck gives this really long file name, Black Magic Hyperdeck Studio Mini, and quadrant, 4 zeros and 3 zeros 1, etc. So these are the two clips that are already recorded, and they got automatically named by the Hyperdeck itself. We want to specify the names when we record. And so if we look at the documentation here under record, we could just hit record and it'll record. But if we hit record :space name : we get the opportunity to provide a file name. And I'm going to eventually use this to be able to take information from the take recorder and name the file to match the take recorder settings. For now, let's just make sure we can record to a specific name. So just use this to Control-C, copy the command. Let's go back to Unreal and maximize our graph editor. And so let's create a function for doing this, because I'm going to want to be able to call this from outside the actor. And so a function will make that nice and tidy. So back down here to functions, we'll add a function and we'll call it record file. And here's our function graph, and we're going to want an input. No, we shouldn't need an input because we can have a variable for the file name. So let's go to variables and add a variable. This is being added to the actor. This variable is not inside the function, it's inside the actor. So let's call this file name and make sure it's a string. And we'll make that public so that we can edit it in the details panel, as well as address that from outside of the actor. And finally, we'll put that to use. We will drag that file name out here, get that file name, and we'll make a command. We're going to want to append strings. So let's put together our command and that file name. So right click, type in the word append, string append. For the A input, I'm going to do Control-V, and there's the command, record : space, name : and space. And then after that, I'm just going to plug in that file name. And so then this is what we're going to send as our command string. So let's right click and say send CMD. There's our command string, and there is our execution pin. So now whatever's in file name should end up being the file name that we record. So let's compile that. We'll close this, and we'll want to make sure we have a default value for this. So let's just call it UE5 file for now. Here we go. Compile. All right. Now that should be added over here, UE5 file. There's our file name. Wonderful. And so let's right click, scroll, and have a record command. So we're going to right click and say record. And no, we're not going to say record. We need to create a custom event. All right, add event, add custom event. And we'll call that record. And then we'll go ahead and call our function, which is record file. Yes, record file. Call that function. No parameters needed. We just want to make sure we make this event something that can be called in the editor. And so we'll hide this and compile. And as you can see, by the way, these buttons are showing up in alphabetical order based on the event names. So you can always get creative with how you name these. So these buttons can be in whatever order you like. So now, in theory, I should be able to connect. And let's just make sure the connection's working. Play, stop, wonderful. So sequencer, oops, didn't want to do that. Let's just move this out of the way a little bit. Oh, yeah, let's just move this out of the way. And I'll just play so we have something to record. So here's our metahuman. She's doing her thing, and record. And sure enough, hopefully our feed, there we go. We've got recording and our metahuman is talking on our Hyperdeck. So off to a good start. Let's hit stop. And that stopped our recording. I'll stop on the sequencer. So now a moment of truth. Let's go back to our telnet command prompt and let's do that clip space get command. And sure enough, there we have our new file recorded and it's named UE file. So there we go. There's all the commands that we really need to get working in the actor. So now we need to tie these into the take recorder itself. And so to do that, we're going to need to use an editor utility widget because the take recorder commands are designed to function with an editor utility widget, not necessarily an actor. So we'll go back to our content browser. Let's right click and save that actor blueprint and right click and create our editor utility widget. So we'll scroll up to editor utilities and choose editor utility widget. And we'll call this Hyperdeck widget. Okay, and we can save that and double click to open up the widget. It's going to look like this. Here we are. It opened up on the other window or other screen. So again, for efficiency for this tutorial, I'm not going to add any UI over here, but you can certainly look into creating UI and maybe have little output print statements happening here to give status updates. But really what we want to do is work on our graph. So up here in the upper right hand corner, we'll click on the graph, and this is where we'll be able to connect with our take recorder. So we're really only going to need our event construct so that when this widget is open in the editor, it's going to essentially create the bridge between the take recorder and our actor for sending commands to the Hyperdeck. So only event we're really going to need is this event construct for now. So I will pull an execution pin off of event construct. And let's go ahead and first of all connect to our actor. So the actor has to be in the level, and now we need to get it. So what we're going to do is first find it. So we're going to say get actor of class. There we are. Get actor of class. We only have one actor out there, and it is our Hyperdeck. So let's do our hype. And here it is, Hyperdeck TCP. That's the actor class that we have out on our level. And we should get one back. And again, really, best practice would be to have some error trapping going on here. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and straight code this. So we're going to assume that we got that Hyperdeck actor, and for the sake of let's say streamlining this, I'm going to go ahead and put the return value into a variable. So again, this is in our widget, not in the actor. So variable, I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call this Hyperdeck actor. And now we'll find the Hyperdeck actor class. And so here's the Hyperdeck TCP and an object reference. And we shouldn't necessarily need to make that public. So let's compile that. And then finally we can drag it out and set the Hyperdeck actor variable to the return value. So connector data, connector execution. So now this Hyperdeck actor variable is containing our, basically a reference to the actor that's doing all our communications with the Hyperdeck. Great. So now we just need to trap information coming from the take recorder. So if I right click here, I can type in the word take. And since we're creating an editor utility widget, we have a whole bunch of functions here that are related to the take recorder. Wonderful. Some things that we want to do is every time the take recorder is just about to record, we want to get the slate and the take and use those to edit the variable that's in our Hyperdeck actor so that we define the file name that's going to record based on what's in take recorder. So we need to say take on pre-record, prepare, okay, yeah, set on take recorder pre-initialize. So basically what we're going to do here is anytime the take recorder is about to record, it's going to trigger an event, and we are setting what event that's going to trigger. So set on take recorder pre-initialize, we're going to run that, and we need to create an event. So we'll just drag off of here and type in custom to add a custom event. And we'll call this take setup. All right. So now in take setup, we need to basically get the information that's on the slate and the take number. And those are in the take recorder panel. So let's go ahead and pull off of execution, type in take, and there's our take recorder stuff. We should be able to open take recorder panel. There we go. So it gets the currently open panel. Open it if one is not open, but it'll already be open for us. So we'll open that, and that gives us a return value for the take recorder panel. Now we need to get the metadata out of that take recorder panel. So we'll get this return value and say meta, there we go, and we should be able to get take metadata. Wonderful. Okay, so this should have the slate and the take in it. So let's pull this off and type in the word slate. Sure enough, get slate. Wonderful. And we should also be able to get a take number. So get take. Sure enough, there it is. Get take number right there. Get take number. Okay, so here we've got the slate as a string, and we've got the take number as an integer. So we need to put these together to make a new file name. So let's go ahead and take the return value and append the take ID. So we'll do append, string append, and we've got our slate, and we'll just connect this, and we get a conversion automatically. You know what? Let's add a pin. Let's put the take here, and let's just put the word take. Double click delete. Let's just put the word take here. Space take and space. There we go. So we'll get our slate, space take, space, and then the take number. And that should be what we end up using as our file name. So let's go ahead and get our Hyperdeck actor. Get the Hyperdeck actor. And we want to set the variables. So set file name, set file name. There we go. So there's our variable. We're going to set the file name, and we're going to set that file name to this. So there we go. We'll make sure we connect our execution pins, and let's tidy up a little bit here. And that's good enough for this tutorial. So when take recorder is about to initialize and about to fire off a take, we just want to retrieve our slate and our take ID, and we're going to put that into the file name inside the Hyperdeck actor, which is going to be sending commands to the Hyperdeck itself. Great. So finally, we'll want to respond to the take recorder when it starts recording. So we'll right click, type in take. There's our take recorder. And let me type in the word start and set on take recorder started. Okay, so this will fire when the take recorder gets started. Just set it over here. We want to make sure we do indeed initialize this. Remember, this is all running in the construct event of this widget. So the widget gets the actor, sets up this event that will pick up just before take recorder runs. It's going to set the file name. Now we're defining what the take recorder event should do when it starts recording. And so we'll pull off of here. We'll do a custom event again. We'll call this start record. And here we're just going to run that function from our Hyperdeck actors. So let's pull from the Hyperdeck actor and type in record. And we should have, there we go. This is our function. Call function record, call function record file. So record file is our function. So that should do it. And let's just double check. If I go back over to the Hyperdeck, do we have our, here's our TCP socket actor. Let's just dock this in here. And so record, just one word, that was the event. And record file was the function. So this will trigger the record file. I guess either one would have worked for us because we're not really passing anything. Both of them just use the variables that are already in the actor. So that's great. One last thing is that we do want to stop the Hyperdeck whenever the take recorder stops. So let's do a right click and take space stop and set on take recorder stopped. So again, as we build our widget, we're going to define an event to be called whenever the take recorder is stopped. And here we're going to do a custom event one last time. And we're going to stop record. And finally, again, let's just double click here to get a dot. And we'll pull from that and say stop. We're going to call that stop event. And that's it. So now the utility widget is all set up. Again, it would be good to have better error trapping in here and making sure everything is correct data-wise, but for the purpose of the tutorial, we're just going to skip that. We're already running pretty long. So go ahead and compile. We didn't get any errors, so that's good. Let's go ahead and reduce the size of this window. And I'm just going to set this aside on my other monitor. And let's go ahead and right click and save this. And so connect TCP, play. That's working. Wonderful. Stop. Okay. So let's try our take recorder tools. What we're going to do is we have to launch the widget so it'll pick up the events. So right click, run the editor utility widget. We didn't define any UI. That's fine. What's really important is that those catch events are in place. So let's just try this out. It's scene 1, take 22. We'll take a look at our sequencer, and everything should be ready to go. Let's just set the widget off to the side and hit record. In theory, 3, 2, 1. We should be getting a, there it is. We are recording on the Hyperdeck in response to take 22 on the Slate. Take recorder running. Let's hit stop. That should, yep, it stopped our Hyperdeck. And so we are good to go. And let's go back to our command prompt and type in that clips get command one more time just to see what our file names are. And sure enough, scene 1, take 22. So that's it. That is all the steps. I know that was a long tutorial, but we have a really useful tool here now. And the nice thing is that anything that's recorded on the Hyperdeck, the file names will match the file names for the sequences and the animations that get recorded by Take Recorder. I hope this helps. Until next time, have fun.